We're here.
Hello, all. We have no opening. We still have no opening. We need an opening. Well,
Jerry.
No.
George.
No, they're dead to me.
George
Anyway, well,
Costanza.
no, now I can't stand you.
Can't stand you. The chucker.
I can't.
We just moved you know what? This may be the last show that we are going to do together that involves us sitting side by side.
It might be. We'll see.
Moving around.
We'll see.
Because over the weekend, even though I won't be here, perhaps we may have it. Well, we're going to have a change on Monday, no matter what, because I won't be here on Monday. So we.
I don't know. I'm not doing it. So it's not going to be up to me whether it gets done.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it. Guys, make sure you smash that like button and share this conversation. As you know,
welcome.
While it gets started.
It is Thursday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and we care about the issues that really matter. But let's talk about something that's very important. Jen. Let's talk about how.
What is so important? I can't imagine.
Let's talk about the importance of electing Kamala, because if we don't, we're going to lose our democracy because we still have one.
Right. No.
Whatever bearing of one that we think we have.
No.
But do we really have a democracy?
No. The fact that nobody voted for her and yet she's there is the exact proof that we already don't have a democracy. So it's just so interesting that somebody who is not elected to anything is getting to is claiming that somebody else is the end of the democracy.
Colin, I sent you something a little earlier pertaining to what is going on in North Jersey right now with the recently departed Representative Pascarell and how the New Jersey Democratic Party has decided who the people will accept as their next congressional representative.
And yes, Brandon, I know it's a republic. I understand that it's a democratic republic, but I'm talking about principles of democracy. And the principles of democracy are the fact that we vote and that our votes are reflected in our political, in the people that we elect and in our issues. Like, that's what I mean by democracy. I understand that technically that's not how it works.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later. Obviously, you guys have probably all seen. Great to have you here, Carla. Yeah, listen, we're getting back into the groove, and it's great to see everybody who's coming on board. Remember, if you haven't smashed that like button, please make sure that you do. Also, if you are so inclined, please go to patreon.com/generational change. If you do believe in our mission of transforming politics into service for the foreseeable future, neither of us are going to be running for anything, but we are going to do what we can to help in local capacities in a variety of different ways. So make sure that you go there for as little as $5 a month. You can help out. 10, 20, who knows? We'll come up with some creative things. But the fact of the matter is, it is a very dreary time, to say the least. And I think one of the sort of evolutions that we're going to need, if we're ever going to get to where we want to go, is to recognize that our current system is broken beyond repair, and how we evolve past that is the future. That's why, and we're not going to talk about it now at length, but this is why somebody like Jill Stein, who apparently isn't that consequential electorally, as people like to point out, but is getting attacked left and right from the biggest names in the Democratic Party establishment, including AOC. And what that tells me is...
Didn't this already happen, though, when she said it was predatory?
It just happened again earlier today.
Oh.
Because guess what? And I have given him credit time and again.
What more would she say?
Well, Charlemagne the God decided to have Jill Stein on the Breakfast Club earlier, but she wasn't alone. She was with Angela Rye, and we all know how that was going to turn out. But she did get exposure. And as I've often said, it is the Trump effect of politics.
I don't know who Angela Rye is, so...
Probably better you don't. But any exposure is good exposure. And the more that people are given the opportunity to see that, hey, we don't have to stick with what we have.
So what does that have to do with AOC going after her yet again?
Because they're deeply concerned that...
But I mean, what was her correlation? Like, all of a sudden, she just came out against Jill Stein again? Like, why was she commenting again about Jill Stein?
You know what? Jordan will be here in a minute. So you know what? We might as well cover it now since we are talking about it. So this is... So everyone knows who... Well, not everybody. But a lot of people know that Charlemagne the God has a very, very popular morning radio show in New York City called The Breakfast Club. And he brings on all different types of people and from all different walks of life, but has ventured, if you will, into the political arena. So he is talking about these issues, and he is making his audience informed. And one of the reasons why they can't stand him in the Democratic establishment is because he doesn't toe the line for the establishment and Kamala Harris. That's not to say he won't vote for her, but he believes that other people have the right to have their voice expressed. And in the case of Jill Stein, who is on the Green Party, despite the fact that they would prefer that the Green Party doesn't exist, we know that the Democratic Party has moved heaven and earth.
But yet democracy is at threat because of Trump.
Yes.
That's the threat. As they're suing the Green Party to keep them off the ballot left and right, Trump is the problem with democracy.
Must stop democracy to protect democracy.
They just know that they can't win in an actual vote. They know that. They know that they can't win if it was just an actual fair vote.
You know, the other thing that I've noticed, which I think you probably have too, is that if you look at a lot of these polls that they are doing, they generally do everything in their capacity to avoid acknowledging that there are third-party candidates. It's always this head-to-head matchup.
Which is how they get the poll results that they prefer. That's the thing, which is why polls are so hard, because literally how you present the question changes the entire dynamic of the poll. And it's just, I don't trust them. I don't trust polls.
This is so for those of you who don't know, Angela Rye is an attorney. I believe she's based out of Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. She is definitely in the Democratic Party establishment. And there was a dust up that happened earlier today, but you had to know that this was coming.
But why? What is she in the party as opposed to, like, Jill's there as a presidential candidate? What is she there for?
That's a very good question, and I hope that Charlemagne will eventually answer that question.
Other than he's really a tool, but
well,
because I'm not a huge fan of him.
Well, if you wanted your viral moment, you got it, and here it is.
Is the talking point of AOC the other day, who is taking her marching orders from the DNC. This is exactly what they say, that we are only running for president.
Of color as parroting talking points.
Okay, so here's the problem right off the bat. This is the reason, probably as much as any reason, that people are sick of the Democratic Party establishment. Because even when there are circumstances like Trump going on stage the other night saying, listen, the Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, they're totally eating your cats. And it's like, okay, that's a terrible statement to make, and it does have racial undertones. But when you say racism is at every corner, and you're going to bring up this idea, how dare you question a woman of color? It's like, this is the type of stuff that turns people completely off to politics. They're like, I don't want to be involved with this shit. Why would I be?
I actually don't even like the whole person of color term. I actually find that kind of just annoying. I do. I find it annoying.
The other problem...
but what are people of color? We're all colored. We're all different. Actually, technically, we're all shades of brown. Every single person, even you, and I'm talking on that, you're the inside of the paint spectrum. But like, you're way on the inside of the spectrum, but everybody is a shade of brown. So like, I actually really have come to dislike the term people of color. And I think that having generalizations discounts different issues that different groups have. And it allows certain people to sort of use it in a way that really they ought not, like certain people we have known that have used that every type of thing. So, I'm just saying, I don't like the term people of color. So continue.
So then what is Angela Rye's motivation? Why would she feel the need to throw that at Jill Stein?
First of all, if you're saying she's a Dem operative person,
I would say that she's definitely a Dem establishment.
So then she went to Overwoke University, and she's going to sit here and do her overwoke nonsense to distract from any legitimate economic issues. And she's going to do that because that's what they do in this whole party. That's the entire point of the Democratic Party, is to distract you with overwokeness so that you don't focus on the actual economic issues.
Colin, can you
my theory.
Can you also pull up the tweet from Liz Smith, who went after Jill Stein? You can also pull up the one from AOC, but the one from Liz Smith I think was very telling because the responses said it all. The other thing that I really don't think people truly understand is that it's not just that the Democratic Party has moved so far into war hawk territory because they've become engulfed with the neocons. I welcomed them in with open arms, but there is still that overeducated liberal class that believes that they are better than everybody else. And this is a prime example of such. But we'll finish out this clip. I'm not sure if this.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm glad I don't know who this is.
Instead of us looking at basic math, the one thing that AOC has done that you haven't is win some elections.
And it is.
So, okay.
Yes, because she was backed by an entire infrastructure and operation that did that in a party that was kind of asleep at the wheel at that election at that time.
Not only
that's the only reason.
Not only that, but to be fair,
oh my God, Jill Stein, like as if she could even get a foothold. She spends all her time fighting lawsuits to be kept out of the election.
Kamala Harris is going to have somewhere in excess of, in just keep in mind, this is in a 5-month window, 4-month window. She's going to have an excess of $1 to $1.5 billion to spend. Could you even fathom that type of money?
No.
And the point is, when you've got that type of capital and you're throwing that at something, could you imagine how much damage Jill Stein could do if she had $20 million to her name? They would lose their mind.
They would.
They wouldn't know what to do.
You know how many balloons you could get for their big fancy balloon drop? That's how you get, that's a lot of balloons that you get for that amount of money.
Before we bring Jordan in, I'm sure Jordan is aware of what happened earlier today. This goes without saying that when AOC decides to go after her, nobody needs talking points to know Jill Stein hasn't won so much as a bingo get. You see, again, when you go there, there's two things that are happening here. One, it's showing how thin-skinned, and you really are a politician because almost every politician is as thin-skinned as anybody that you could think of in society. But this is Jill Stein. I thought this person didn't matter. And you're treating her like you're like a scorned, ex-girlfriend or something like that. Like, this is really what I would consider to be beneath somebody who apparently is going to run for president in 2028 if Kamala doesn't win.
I will laugh so hard if she ever. First of all, I don't think she could win a statewide race, let alone a nationwide race. I don't.
Well, she is watching out for Chucky the Shoom to retire in a few
Good for her,
years.
because she doesn't have the balls to do it while he's still there. No one does. Jill Stein does. See, that's the thing. This is when people mock other people in this way, to me, it's just like, yeah, you wish you had. You wish you had that spine. You wish you had that. Like, there's no reason to say anything like this, except for the fact that you have some serious insecurity, but also that you also have now attended the Hillary Clinton School of Condescension. And let me tell you, that will go about as far as the deplorables.
And on top of everything else, and I said this last week, and I'll say it again now, all you're doing is helping Jill Stein. So you know what? Keep doing it. If, as far as I'm concerned, anything that creates more momentum to help the people in Gaza and the West Bank, great. Because the more that she looks like a threat to actually upend this election in favor of Trump, maybe they might do something. But you know what? Maybe they won't, because I don't think they really care.
But if Alex actually cared, then she would be part of that solution. But she really doesn't care. It's just pathetic. Actually, it's really pathetic. I love how she's talking about building, organizing infrastructure as if she's done that. I'm so curious what infrastructure she built.
It's not a good look. Above everything else, it's not a good look.
And you fought and organized and won. Please.
And when you're siding with people that clearly, again, when you're siding with people like Liz Smith and Dick Cheney, and you're crapping on somebody like Jill Stein, you know, you're supposed to be extending the olive branch and saying, you know what, we do need to make a better effort. Otherwise, Jill Stein could ultimately cost us the election again, like she did in 2016.
Here's hoping.
This time around, I think Jill Stein might actually cost you the election because she didn't cost you shit in 2016.
No, you wanted to keep saying that. Now that's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
But this time, especially in Pennsylvania and Michigan, it might very well be that case.
Oh, it's going to be glorious.
And when we think about just where we say, and this is a perfect transition, because when we think about where we are today in terms of the issues that really matter. See, everyone's so caught up in the horse race, but in reality, we're living in the United Corporations of America, as our good friend likes to say. It's the truth. If you think that Donald Trump is the existential threat to this country, no, it's Dow Chemical.
I say to somebody, if you think that Donald Trump is the existential threat to this country, what I say to you is, congratulations, you're privileged. Sorry, that's just a fact. I'm sorry, I'm going to call it.
We have to do an intro because this is a book that I have just about finished. It's called We the Poisoned. It is an excellent read. And yes, I am plugging my friend's book, and I highly recommend that you go out and get a copy of it. But here is the brief description of We the Poisoned by Jordan Chariton.
Biggest government cover-up of the 21st century.
What do you call a decade of repeated Watergates, repeated times that they're actually trying to, how I feel, kill us off?
None of the facts have been disputed. Erin Brockovich actually said, this is the biggest cover-up you'll ever read.
And 6 months after the water switch, my throat started bothering me. So I went for a biopsy. Long story short, it was aggressive throat cancer.
And justice delayed has been justice denied.
Yeah, the brown water coming out of there. And, you know, in the bathroom.
And the youngest suicide victim, 5 years old. We talk about the effects, the effects of lead. It affects your brain, it affects your mentality.
It's been 8 years, man. It's been 8 fucking years. I can't take it. And if I die because of this, I'm dead. I'm dead. But someone's got to speak it up.
What I can do is, at the very least, expose what was done to these people, the details, the who, what, when, why. Maybe it could help them fight it elsewhere.
He is the host of Status Quo News. He is the founder of Status Quo News, and he is the best independent journalist, in my and Jen's humble opinion, in the U.S. today. Jordan Chariton, welcome back to Generational Change.
Hey, sorry, my studio is on the fritz. Something's wrong with the camera, so you get me in the kitchen.
Well, our studio's always on the fritz.
We always
so,
have
issues.
So.
We understand that. We always need more. We could use help too, but Jordan needs it more than
Jordan
we do.
does
So
need it more
please. Tell us how this all came about. I think you should probably start from the beginning. What first got you to head out to Flint in the first place? I think you had briefly mentioned that somebody had messaged you and you thought, you know what, this seems like a story that's at least worth taking a look at. How did the whole evolution of covering the story of Flint's water crisis come about?
Yeah, so in 2016, I was kind of covering the Bernie Woodstock stage. I was covering Bernie rallies. I was covering Trump rallies. So really, Flint was just kind of, I was like everyone else. I saw it on the news, but I naively thought, you have to imagine the government's going to fix this, right? So I was at the People's Summit, which I think you were there too, Peter.
Yes, I was.
If memory, Chicago, and a resident of Flint came up to me. So that was really the first time I ever talked to anyone from Flint.
Wow.
And this was summer, I believe, of 2016. So
June of
this was
17.
after, this was after, Rachel Maddow did her little town hall in Flint, and the media went to Flint for 5 minutes. And she was basically just pleading with me to come to Flint and cover it, because she was telling me that the media had abandoned Flint and it was a just disaster. Things were getting worse, not better. And it just stuck with me, even though at that moment I was, in election mode, and 2016 was obviously really, a special time. I asked my boss at the time, Jank, to send me there. To his credit, he did. And I went there for the first time over the summer of 2016. And, I had never seen anything like it, to be honest. I mean, I grew up not wealthy, but not poor. I grew up kind of middle class Long Island. My biggest worry I had was getting teased as a kid, but I never wanted for water or food or anything like that. And going to Flint, I mean, within an hour or two of going to different people's homes, I was finding just laundry machines broken from the water damage, dishwashers broken from the dirt, from the contaminated water, kids showing me rashes on their skin, people showing me plastic bags with globs of their hair that had fallen out. And meanwhile, like when I went back to the hotel that first night, I remember this to this day, I turned on CNN and they were covering whatever insane thing Trump tweeted. Right. So it was kind of like I'm in the thick of this in Flint, seeing like a rolling disaster that already was kind of being forgotten by the media, and the people were in. I don't even like the word crisis, because people kind of have become numb to it. Like it's just a disaster, and it still is 10 years later. So that was kind of my first trip there, and how I got involved. And that first trip, in many ways, kind of radicalized me a bit journalistically. To we all, the old folks in journalism like to pretend that we should all just be neutral dinosaurs and not have an opinion or not care about the stories we cover. I think you'd kind of have to be a sociopath to witness what I just described and not care and not take it upon yourself to do something about it. So that's why I went back 21 times since then. I would have never been able to stay on this story or even publish this book without the support of viewers, because it's very expensive to keep doing on the ground reporting. But in the beginning, really, I wanted to focus on the human suffering. I wasn't really thinking about like cover up or breaking, investigative components, but the residents were just dumping on my lap. Just a massive cover up and details of corruption, and that this wasn't some mistake as the media was describing, that this was actually a massive financial scheme that caused this. So that's kind of how I first got involved.
Yeah, I have this thought that I've been thinking about lately since what's been going on in Gaza, and that genocide. And this is what's going on here. We're having our own genocide in this country, and we see it in these kinds of situations. This is to me what I think of as like domestic genocidal behavior. And we're seeing it. And let's be clear. I mean, talk about what kind of community that is, because it's not Beverly Hills. Okay. So, talk about the people that are there, because this is how come they get away with stuff like this.
Yeah. I mean, I've been saying for a while, basically ever since October 7th happened. And to me, obviously, I'm not minimizing what's going on in Gaza, but to me, this is a slow-moving genocide. Not every genocide the bodies don't pile up all at once.
Right.
And this has been going on for 10 years. And frankly, I don't think there's I don't think there's ever going to be a way to know the full, accurate death count of how many people have died in Flint because of this. They did not have a health registry for many years. Flint's population has shrank by 20,000 over the last 10 years. So the people that left, nobody is tracking their health conditions. Cancer is surging in Flint, and I can tell you it's not coming from the weather. It's coming from the water. And between cancers, liver failure, kidney failure, also, lead and heavy metals, it attacks pretty much every system and organ you could think of. So, I mean, just anecdotally, it's not really anecdotally. I mean, I think there was enough. In 2018, when I went there, I was working on a story. I knocked on over 400 doors, and I could tell you, like almost every other block, I was finding out a new person that had just died on that block. And not only elderly people, like 40s, 50s, 60s. So this is a mass ongoing. I want to emphasize that ongoing disaster, and it's also an ongoing cover up because the media has pushed this bullshit narrative that this was just a tragic mistake born from government officials trying to save some money. No, this was and Peter, you're reading the book, so I hope you could see this. This was happened because they wanted to make money. This is a for-profit scheme to make money, and the residents of Flint were used kind of as guinea pigs. And frankly, there is not a chance that anything like this would have happened in, Ann Arbor, which is an hour from Flint, wealthier, whiter community. I mean, name it. The nice part of Miami, the nice part of Debbie Wasserman's district. This happened in Flint because the politicians did not care enough because of who made up that community to do the due diligence to make sure the water would be safe. So yeah, I could get in the weeds, but to be clear, Flint never got the COVID death count. The clock, the live count on the networks when COVID was at its worst with 3,000 dying a day.
Nobody cared. Nobody cared.
So Flint never got that, but I could tell you, I've talked to nurses that are afraid to go public. I've talked to lawyers. I mean, the true death count could be in the tens of thousands when this is all said and done.
Well, I think the other issue, and this is something that they're never going to really be able to account for. This is the kind of stuff that causes like genetic and chromosomal abnormalities in future generations. So this is one of those things. So forget like literally the mental retardation that occurs from lead poisoning and those things. This is going to affect generations just from that damage to these kids. And I don't think and it's not as if these people can just go, because who's buying their places? Where are they going? They can't afford to go anywhere. This is where I think there should have been some sort of, if we lived in my universe, and the same thing for like places like East Palestine, is you have it where people can actually get paid to relocate, that you subsidize that and pay and buy their property so they don't take a loss, and try to do the best you can to make people whole somewhere else. But we don't live there. So that's Gen World.
And I think the prime example of the way that the story is told in conjunction, not even contrast, in conjunction with East Palestine. Flint has always been a very traditional blue collar Democratic stronghold in the state of Michigan. East Palestine is an example of the quintessential rural red community that is Trump country. And what is universally true about both is that they're working class communities, and they have been fucked over by the United Corporations of America and the spineless politicians who are only concerned about their careers to ensure that they don't piss off the wrong corporate donor who could take them out of power and put somebody in who's going to look the other way. And that's essentially what's happened over the course of the past several decades. You could say, Reagan started it. The truth is that we've been heading in this direction for far too long. And by the time we all wake up to that reality, we're far too gone. And now we're the ones looking at those that are, getting so caught up in the horse race of the presidential election. And I'm thinking this really has very little to do with anything in terms of how far along we are in this complete devastation and destruction. And what you put forward so effectively in the book, even though I think the average reader is going to have to read it more than once, is to understand. I've often said, when it comes to somebody like, how does somebody like Wasserman Schultz stay in power? If you look, if you grew up in the 80s, for example, or even the early 90s, like I did, Jen may have as well, and you did too. And what you do is I was
a little earlier than that.
If you look behind the TV, and the way it used to be in the mid to late 80s, when everybody got their Nintendo and you had a VCR, and you had a stereo, and you had a TV, and they were all stacked.
Atari, Betamax.
Look behind the TV. What do you see? You see about 50,000 wires all crossed together in an endless sea of just complete and utter devastation, as far as I can see. It's
Where
like
are we going with this? The analogy.
Let me finish, please. What that represents is the absolute convolution within our system. It's how somebody like Wasserman Schultz interconnects herself like those wires. I'm connected here. I'm connected there. Well, the same thing happens in a place like Flint. Oh, listen, it's the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. It's their fault. They're the ones who did it. I got to look out for myself.
So can we find out? I want to go down the list of everyone who should be in prison, Jordan. Like, seriously, like.
Can I at least make my point?
It's just, okay, yeah.
Do you agree with what I'm saying? That a lot of the story here is that there is this sort of wires all interconnected in this complete entrenched system that everyone, especially anyone who's working for or in government, is always looking out for their own ass. They're not, I mean, they may sympathize, as a number of them say, listen, this is off the record. I think what they're doing is terrible, but I'm not going public with this because I got a career to think about. And I think that that was a very pointed message I came across from people all the way at the top to even all the way, to the former mayor of Flint, who knew what was going on and was like, well, Mr. Wallen just decided that he wasn't going to do anything about it.
I think why this book is so important, and obviously I'm biased because I wrote it, is I really think, our audience is, everyone kind of is on the same page. We live in a corrupt country, but there's different levels of corruption, right? There's your average, government selling city council to real estate developers. And then there's political payoffs to cover up the fact that your water is toxic and looking the other way as people are dying. Like the book, I did my best to meticulously show what I believe is the biggest government cover up of the 21st century, because this to me is the real Watergate, because nobody actually died from Watergate. Like Watergate was just a bunch of knuckleheads breaking into an office. In the book and the story at Flint, I mean, you're talking political payoffs at the highest levels of the government in Michigan, where the governor's right-hand man was trying to silence sick Flint residents so that it wouldn't get out that the water was toxic.
And if I may, a guy like Baird, that's a real sociopath, if not an outright psychopath, because that's how you have to be. You have to be completely devoid of any empathy to do what he did for his man, for the governor of the state of Michigan.
So you have political payoffs, not literally so that people would be left in the dark that they're drinking contaminated water. You had government officials destroying their phones right before the launch of a criminal investigation, just totally erasing their messages. You had government officials just straight up witness tampering with witnesses to get them, to lie to prosecutors. I mean, there's so many examples of just each little thing was a massive crime on its own. The payoffs, the witness tampering, destroying evidence. I mean, I got phone calls showing the governor himself was in on hiding the deadly Legionnaire's disease, which is like a deadly waterborne pneumonia. He knew about it 16 months before he notified the public. 16 months. So he knew that the residents' water was toxic and people were dying for 16 months before he opened his mouth. I mean, that is sociopathic, in my view, psychopathic. And so to me, this is not just a story of, politicians doing bad things to enrich themselves. This is literally politicians knowingly killing people to cover their ass, and no one has been held accountable for that. And I can't think of anything, and there's a lot of corruption in America. I can't think of anything that is more corrupt and more deadly than that. And why I've said that this is so important. This could not have happened. You can't have toxic water like this, and you can't have this going on for 10 years because it's still a disaster 10 years later without government itself being toxic. And while we're flooded with fundraising emails about our sacred democracy being at stake in this election, this is an actual example of democracy, what happens when it's removed. That's what happened here. Not to get too in the weeds, but the former governor in 2011 declared a financial emergency in Flint. It was very controversial at the time. Legally, I don't really think he was on solid ground, but he rammed this thing through. He appointed unelected, keyword unelected emergency managers. They were basically like czars to take over cities like Flint. It was Flint, Detroit, and a couple other majority Black communities. And these czars, who were basically just puppets for the governor, they replaced their power, superseded the power of the elected mayor, the elected city council. And the first order of business, let's try and privatize the water system in Michigan. And that's what happened. That's why Flint was using the Flint River in the first place, because there was this financial scam to create a brand new water system that was going to be a privatized water system. And that's all. I can explain it if you want, but bottom line, while that new water system was being built, they said, let's save money by using the Flint River. And we won't, the Flint River, that General Motors had dumped its shit in for 100 years, and Dow Chemical and DuPont had dumped its shit in for 100 years. And oh, by the way, we're going to use the Flint Water Plant, which is the equivalent of like these Boeing planes that are falling apart midair. That's what the Flint plant was. It was not equipped to treat the water. So every step of the way, there was a 1,000% carelessness and recklessness, because these are just poor Black people. So just use the river. We'll figure it out as we go. I don't think any of these politicians woke up thinking, how do I poison these people? I don't think it was that dastardly. But I also don't think they actually thought. I don't think their the top thought was not health first. It was the balance sheet. How do we save money? How do we make money on this new water system? And to be clear, this is every level. This is the EPA is involved in this cover up. Several presidents, not just Obama.
Right.
The EPA, the state of Michigan government, the city of Flint government, Genesee County, which is the county Flint is part of. Then you have a very powerful private foundation, which is involved pulling the strings that caused this. And you have Wall Street banks. So to your point, Peter, this is kind of this whole dark cabal of all these cascading factors and all these entities. And to your point, Jen, no one is in prison. And I mean, I could start from the top, but I mean,
I am curious. I think we should have you should definitely do how they have the deck of cards that they use for the terrorists. When there should definitely be certain people that are on the crap list. But now that you have this information, does that in any way help any of these people with any civil claims? Because, I mean, especially I see that you obviously have spoken with Erin Brockovich. I mean, it's this seems like the kind of thing that now that there's evidence that people knew things that you might be, not that solves the problem, mind you. But is there any chance for any sort of civil action?
So there's been civil action, woefully inadequate civil action, but there's been a mass class action lawsuit that's been going on for years. A couple of years ago, the state of Michigan, under beloved MSNBC governor Gretchen Whitmer, settled for $600 million with the residents of Flint. That might sound like a lot of money. It's pennies. 200 million of that immediately goes to the lawyers.
Of course.
So it's really 400 million going to the residents. People that have crunched the numbers. I mean, basically each household might get enough to get a used car. So when you get cancer, you're screwed. They don't have Medicare for all or universal health care from this settlement. They don't have the services they need because children, I mean, you were mentioning it, Jen, but you got serious learning disabilities in children from those heavy metals. There has been a rise in autism. Regression at every level, reading, math, science, you name it.
Yeah.
Kids can't hold a job. Now, teenagers who were kids when this happened, there's a rise in suicide among teenagers in Flint. We all remember it's not so easy to be a teenager without the whole lead poisoning, but you add on heavy metal damage, it affects your mood. It affects everything: depression, anxiety, PTSD. So, I mean, the settlement is hopefully inadequate, and the residents haven't gotten a penny yet. I also want to point out why I am trying my best to make sure people know this is an ongoing story. The EPA, 10 years later, has not admitted guilt or settled with the people of Flint. So that's Obama's EPA, Trump's EPA, Biden's EPA, and whoever wins. The EPA is on the hook, and I believe they're going to owe Flint a shit ton of money. They have not admitted guilt, and they are not settling. Flint still has a couple buckets where they could get money. The EPA, some of the engineering companies that were a part of this cover-up, but the biggest nut was the state of Michigan, and like I said, I believe it's crumbs. And also, part of what I'm hoping from this book, it's a hope, is there's a massive financial scheme that is still being covered up that caused this. And from the lawyers I spoke with, that financial scheme currently, as it stands, might be the only thing that is still possible for new criminal charges. So that's why the current Attorney General of Michigan, a Democrat, is basically trying to bury that. So I'm going to try to break this down so people understand it. The Flint Water Crisis at its core was a financial scam. Flint had gotten its water from Detroit for 50 years without a problem, but Detroit was raising Flint's rates, price gouging. So that gave local politicians, the Snyder administration at the time, the excuse, well, Detroit's charging too much. So they came up with an idea, let's build a completely identical, duplicative water pipeline that would run the same exact path as the water pipeline that Detroit delivered water to Flint. We're going to run it along the same path. The only difference would be the pipeline that Detroit sent Flint water to, it was treated water. So it was already chemically treated. The new pipeline would be raw water. Well, what do you need a lot of raw water for? Fracking, auto industry, agriculture, meat packing. I mean, basically they were calling
gray water. It's your gray water.
They were calling it the blue economy. So this new water system is going to create the blue economy because businesses would get access to cheaper water. In fact, most of the water from this system wasn't even going to be used for residents. It was going to be used for business. But they were framing it as this is going to save Flint so much money as opposed to staying on Detroit. So at the last hour, Detroit didn't want to lose Flint as a customer because Flint was Detroit's biggest water customer. So Detroit offered Flint a 48% discount. So you go to the store, half off. Pretty good deal. If Flint was actually going to save money by staying with Detroit, but it was never about saving money. It was about creating a completely unnecessary new water system that was going to be privatized because everything's being privatized. So, but there was a catch. Flint at that time, because of all the things your channel talks about, my channel talks about, offshoring of jobs, deindustrialization. I mean, Flint was a rotting economic corpse in 2014. It had no credit rating. It was nearly bankrupt, and it could not legally borrow any more money. It was not allowed to borrow any more money legally because it was almost bankrupt. So, but for this new water system, the powers that be, including the unelected emergency manager, that czar, they needed Flint to be part of the financing to build a nearly $300 million new water system. So they created a fake emergency that would give Flint an exception to get around that debt limit to borrow $100 million. The former mayor said it best, how does a broke city borrow $100 million? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So they basically created this cockamamie fraudulent scheme to allow almost bankrupt Flint to borrow $100 million to build this completely unnecessary water system. And who issued the bonds?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Where is that from?
JP Morgan and Wells Fargo. So the
bank, the fact that Wells Fargo is still standing after the shit that they pulled with their customers, it's like this is where I try to explain to people that until you recognize that Trump is merely a symptom of a completely bigger circumstance that you are refusing to see or just don't want to see. This system is broken. Like, our system is broken.
I'm just so sad. Like, and people have no idea what that's like to be stuck somewhere, what that's really like to be stuck somewhere. And
why don't they just get up and go somewhere else?
I remember that after East Palestine. Well, they should just move. Oh, yes, that's what they're going to do. They're all going to just get up and go. And they're going to do what with their properties? Because who's going to buy them? And how can they afford it? Like,
that mortgage that they have on that house?
Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares.
Well,
it makes me so angry.
I want to be clear, because I've been trying to frame the book, particularly to the media, because it's not easy to promote a book about Flint during an election year, that this is an ongoing cover-up. And why I say that is what I just described, that financial scheme, the original Flint prosecutors, so there was investigators and prosecutors in the beginning of this, starting in 2016, they were actually going after the money. They were going after that fraudulent financial scheme.
Right.
And they were close, based on my reporting, they were pretty much about to charge a massive RICO case. So RICO is what they created in the 70s to go after the mafia. And the current attorney general, a Democrat, Dana Nessel, who is beloved on MSNBC, she was just at the DNC.
Say no more.
So she was just speaking at the DNC. She happens to be gay, which is whatever, but MSNBC was cheering her because she said, "Over my dead body will Trump take my wedding ring from my wife." So they love her over at MSNBC and all these places. But she basically came in. Long story short, she sabotaged the criminal investigation. She fired the prosecutors that were building that RICO case. She did not follow through on it. And right now she is withholding documents that journalistically I'm entitled to. I've put in freedom of information requests to get the documents that outline this RICO case, because those documents, I believe, based on my reporting, they outline who was going to be charged, what the evidence was, and they also outline some of the involvement of the banks. Well, when I put in a freedom of information request, not the Republican Attorney General, the Democratic Attorney General's office told me we don't have the documents. Well, I knew they had the documents because some of my sources have receipts that they have the documents.
Right.
So I publicly threatened to sue them. And then they all of a sudden saw Jesus and said, "Well, we'll look again." And then they suddenly found the documents, but told me they can't give them to me. So why I'm saying this is an ongoing cover-up, literally the Attorney General of Michigan, who happens to be a Democrat, is trying to bury the massive financial scheme that poisoned a whole community, I believe, and based on sources I've spoken with, for two simple reasons. Number one, if this was exposed, I believe it could still be criminally charged, because the RICO laws are more flexible federally in terms of statute of limits. So there's a little bit more time in terms of how long you have to charge RICO federally. If this went forward publicly, the state of Michigan could be on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars in liability, because it was the Attorney General's office that signed off on this fraudulent financial scam. So that's kind of a conflict of interest when the Attorney General is supposed to be going after the bad guys, but at the same time, it's her responsibility to defend the state of Michigan too. Well, it would be in her purview to make sure the state doesn't go bankrupt, because bondholders would sue the state. This is basically what we're talking about, is massive bond fraud. So the state of Michigan could be sued 7 ways to Sunday, and it's been quoted to me they could be on the hook for $300 to $500 million, which could bankrupt the state. But number two, which I think is more important, JP Morgan and Wells Fargo could face hundreds of millions of dollars in liability too, because within that bond deal, they were supposed to do the due diligence to make sure the Flint water plant could safely treat the water. They did not do that. And they have already been sued civilly on behalf of 2,500 Flint children. But of course, a judge threw it out. So the banks got off. So in English, I think the Attorney General is trying to bury these documents and this information from going public, because the state of Michigan could be fucked if they go public. And I think Wall Street banks that just happen to donate to Democrats and Republicans could also be fucked. And they're banking on the fact that the media just doesn't give a shit. They don't
Well,
care
it's
about
more than they
Flint.
don't care. Like as you have found out, it's more than just not caring. It's being bullied and threatened and owned. But so this is interesting. This would be really good for a bar exam. This whole scenario is very good for a bar exam. I see a lot of legal issues here. So you're talking about the initial situation wherein there was this whole like grift in the very beginning to make profit off of the water thing. But then they're beyond that, because at some point when they knew that it was really bad, and then they continue to lie about it instead of fix it when they had that opportunity, that's the beginning of another suit. That's the beginning of another that's another cover up. Those are two separate things. I'm just saying, like, I would write that in my essay.
To me, the infamous line is the cover up's always worse than the crime. I mean, the crime is pretty bad here. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
However, you could never get in people's heads, but I do not believe the former governor of Michigan, Rick Snyder, woke up and said, how do I poison as many black people as possible? I don't think it was intentional to that degree. I think it was recklessness, which is bad, and carelessness, because I think they would have done more. I think they would. Yes. I think they would have done more due diligence and cared more if they were creating a new water system for Ann Arbor, which is wealthy white people. But in this case, the cover up is worse because the crime is the crime. They should be prosecuted because it was an illegal financial scam that caused this. But the cover up is worse because at that point, they knew the water was toxic. And instead of immediately issuing public notifications to the residents, don't drink the water, instead of immediately switching back to Detroit, they worked tirelessly to make sure the residents didn't know that the water was toxic.
See,
they worked tirelessly.
Where it crosses over. This is where it crosses over from negligent to intentional. And this is where, that's how I would argue it.
Well, I just want to make a point, because I was just talking about the current attorney general, why I think she is so complicit in this. So your audience knows, from 2016 to 2019, the first 3 years of the investigation, there was a special prosecutor. So think like Robert Mueller. There was somebody like him for Flint. And he and his team, they were not only building a case on that financial stuff, the RICO, based on my reporting, and it's been confirmed by others, they were building a case against the former Republican governor for involuntary manslaughter. I mean, it would have been a historic, that's never happened in America, not for a sitting governor. And the case was going to be built on, in large part, what I report in the book, that he knew about the deadly Legionnaires outbreak 16 months earlier than he told the public. So a failure to act. So they were actually, based on my reporting, they were doing everything that they should have done. The current attorney general, when she came in, she fired them. She dropped the charges they had charged, because they had also charged some lesser financial crimes as they were building up to this RICO case. And she ended up charging the governor, who they were going to charge with involuntary manslaughter, with a misdemeanor. So when I say that, in this sick, fucked up world we live in, there's so many, most people are either like, let me put my blue hat on, let me put my red hat on. To be clear, this is across both parties. I mean, a Republican was governor when this happened, and it was a Republican administration that was part of the initial cover-up. But it is Democratic politicians right now in Michigan that are aiding the poisoners in burying the whole thing.
I think it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. It could have been the other way. Could have started with a Democrat and ended with a Republican. It doesn't matter.
It could have. I guess my point is, like, I think so many, like I see on Twitter, like people being like, but Jordan, Obama, he gave Flint $170 million, his Congress. And I say, well, how much of that do you think actually went to Flint? Because I've done the reporting. About 40 million of 170 million actually went to the people of Flint for the Flint Water Crisis.
And in what way? And in what way? Because it hasn't repaired their infrastructure. They're still not having clean water. So what is the difference if you're not fixing the problem?
And do you know, and this is what a sick, fucked up, corrupt government we have, that after this became a national scandal, the Republican governor, Rick Snyder, while he was governor, preemptively changed the water pipes in Ann Arbor where he lived. They didn't have a problem with lead, but they replaced all the lead pipes in Ann Arbor. And 10 years later, they have not replaced the pipes in Flint. So I don't want to hear a goddamn thing about democracy being at stake, because if that is democracy, then we have problems. And another thing, I just want your audience to know why I say this is still a disaster to this day, because the media has been very effective in framing this as some tragedy that happened in the past but is now getting better. I was just in Flint for my book. Residents were coming up to me online to get signatures for get me to sign the book, showing me their rashes on their skin now from the water, not from 10 years ago. Rashes they're getting now. Yeah. Residents are still posting video of brown water they're getting. To be clear, it's not like how bad it was in 2016, but throughout the city, they're still having problems. Discolored water, smelly water. And it makes sense. You don't have to be an engineer to understand. If you don't replace the destroyed infrastructure, the pipes are badly corroded because they had basically acid water go through them for 2 years. The water could be fine coming from the plant, but if they're going through damaged pipes, all sorts of shit is still peeling off the pipes into the water. Residents are still losing hair in a lot of cases when they shower. So, I mean, I have residents telling me their eyes burn when they shower, and I've smelled the water in homes, and I've seen discolored water and similar things are going on in East Palestine right now. They're using the same playbook where the EPA does some bullshit testing. They either just straight up manipulate the testing, or they only look for 1 or 2 chemicals or contaminants when there's a whole lot of other shit that they're not looking for. And they declare, everything's meeting our levels, our acceptable levels.
You know what? It reminds me of the IDF investigating itself with their incidents. It's one of those things. Well, we're going to do a very thorough investigation into ourselves here at the EPA.
I was going to say, you can take it a step further and say it's very reminiscent of how privileged liberals look at politics, which is, it really, really sucks with us, but it'll suck even harder with the Republicans. It's like,
you're not to people that see. I try to explain this, and people don't understand it, Jordan, because most of the people in like my regular bubble, they haven't been to the kind of places where you've been, in the kind of places where I've been and talked to different people, and so they can't fathom this world. But I've been to the world in many different spaces where I assure people all the time, it matters not to them whether their next president is Trump or Kamala. Their life sucks either way. It doesn't even come close to mattering. The only people that really matters to are like privileged white, generally, people. And those are the people that just think Trump is the Antichrist. And it shows me their privilege. That's what it should, because the people in Flint, it doesn't matter to them. They had Obama come to town. You see what good that did them.
And now you have Governor Whitmer, who we all know the trajectory that it's going to go. You know, right now, there is no question, especially if Kamala does not win, that Governor Whitmer will absolutely run for president in 28.
Try that.
Attorney General Nessel and potentially Pete Buttigieg will run for governor in Michigan in 26.
See, I don't understand. He's from Indiana.
Doesn't matter.
He moved to Michigan.
So he can't
lives
win.
in Michigan.
He can't win that. He can't win that seat.
With $100 million behind him, he might. That's how broken the system is.
You're forgetting something. You're forgetting something, Jen.
Yeah.
What do you remember? Obama called Pete to drop out.
Of course.
Well, this is Pete collecting, because Obama is going to come and campaign for him in Michigan. But that's neither here.
Good luck with that. And you know what? All of that was pre-genocide. Let's see how that works in Michigan now going forward, because that state is not having it from this party right now. So I think that a lot of those things were maybe discussed long before this shit show.
Jordan, I do want to ask you one thing before you go. You know, obviously we have seen the polls, and these have been, again, one poll's an outlier, but there has been a heavy dose of consistency that the Muslim vote in Michigan is running to Jill Stein, almost at like cheetah speed. I mean, you've got AOC again attacking her today, and a lot of other people coming after her, which to me is always a sign of weakness. It's always a sign of they know that she is a danger to their plans, if you will. But I have to wonder, when you communicate with people in places like Flint,
Yeah.
do they have the same sentiment as the people in Dearborn?
I was going to ask.
I would think that they probably look at the Democratic Party establishment as no different than the Muslim community does, and just thinks, man, we're fucked either way. We really need to go.
Well,
in
yeah,
that
I was
direction.
curious about that too. Yeah, where does Flint stand in relation to like this, what's going on in Michigan with the Muslims?
I could only tell you, I mean, I can't speak for all of Flint, but I kind of get a pulse on things from a lot of the core activists because they have a good feel for things. And a lot of Flint residents right now that I'm hearing are going to vote, but they're going to leave the presidential line empty because they're just fed up, and rightly so. I mean, it's easy to say, but Trump would be worse. But if you've been going through this for 10 years and very little has changed for you, and you're sick, and I think I mentioned, but there's a massive cancer surge right now in Flint. It's one of the worst cancer clusters in America from the water. I mean, sure, we could quibble, well, it was a Republican who covered it up, but whatever. I mean, you kind of just lose hope for either party. And I can tell you, because I was there, Flint residents were overjoyed in 2018 to vote for Gretchen Whitmer. It was like the rescue choppers were coming.
Oh my God.
She ran on delivering justice for Flint. She bashed Rick Snyder and him, which rightly so. She promised to reopen the water stations. You know, you saw lines on TV with cars lined up for blocks to get free water. She didn't open the water stations. She's delivered a state park to Flint, not anything else.
That sounds very familiar.
We have a microcosm of that exact situation here locally, where somebody gave them a park.
Literally,
like here's a park.
Most working class community in the area. So yeah.
So to me, I don't think Flint itself is going to make the difference, but I'll tell you what. First of all, I think a lot of people at the moment are getting ahead of themselves that, oh, Kamala crushed Trump in the debate and it's over. Well, if you remember, Hillary Clinton beat Trump handily in most of the debates in 2016.
In that first debate,
and outspent him. That's the thing. And again, people, it is still early.
And in Michigan in particular, there's a lot more moving parts than Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Not only do you have Dearborn, which I was there recently, and I could tell you, I mean, I can't give a number on it, but I think it's very likely Harris is going to lose 40 to 50% of the Arab American vote in Michigan. And there's 200,000 registered Arab Americans. So in a close race, I mean, that's major. I think there's another issue.
He won that state by last time.
I think there's another issue that was an issue for Hillary Clinton that Kamala Harris is having right now. And I actually just saw it in Philly, 2 days ago. It's not really showing up in the polls, but a lot of black men are shifting to Trump.
Yes. That's real.
That is real.
And that's not, I don't know how to describe the polling, but I don't really think that's showing up in the polling. In Detroit specifically, I actually talked to one.
No,
I actually talked to one of the.
He's drastically.
I talked to one of the top activists in Detroit I know, and I asked him like, "What's going on the ground?" And he told me like a lot of black guys are moving to Trump, not because they like him, but they just say like prices were lower under Trump. So if she doesn't perform, for a Democrat to win Michigan, they have to clean up in Detroit, particularly, and Flint, because those are the two majority black cities, and you need to clean up in the suburbs that surround Detroit. Well, Detroit's majority black, so if you're underperforming among black men, if you're underperforming significantly among Arab Americans, you better get a lot of suburban Republicans to switch to you.
And I want to say, like, in my experience, and I know this personally, that there not only is it black men that are being supportive of Trump, but I want to be clear that this is across socioeconomic lines. Like I know black men that are, we're talking unhoused people that are just as much behind someone like Trump as somebody who you would think is bougie. So this isn't, it isn't, and whether, and I'm not judging that decision, I'm just stating it, that I have met many people when we were campaigning, people that were helping on our campaign, people that were working with us that are definitely of disenfranchised, vulnerable communities.
But unfortunately, our country
prefer Trump.
But our country, unfortunately, in some ways, has turned into this very small slice of the electorate where it really matters. Everybody knows that Florida's going for Trump. That's not the issue here. But in a state like Michigan, for example, still not sure what direction it's going to go in. But as we've seen, as we have evolved over the last several years and watching this unfold, what we realized is ultimately something's going to break within this system. If it's going to happen now, great. If it doesn't, it's going to happen eventually. But we can't keep pretending that things are okay.
It's a Band-Aid. I prefer the ripping it off fast.
And as you have said many times, Jordan, this is the essence of why this book is so important and why we highly recommend
everybody go get Jordan's book.
A copy. And
unless you're me and you're waiting for the audio book.
Jen, I know you're anti-reading, so the audio book will be out.
I already have it. I already bought it. It just doesn't upload. And I said to him, like, all right, well, you know what? It's just no different than school. Whatever. I'm behind. I'm always behind with whatever. I prefer to be read to, even though it's not you doing it.
The links are in the description. But maybe the most important point of all of this is that there are probably 1,000 Flints in this country.
Oh.
That people do not even recognize. You've got you've got East St. Louis, you've got New Orleans, you've got Memphis,
Nolens,
you have East Palestine. I mean, I lived in the Bronx, and I can only imagine the water that I was drinking probably wasn't very safe.
No, because they don't care.
And so it's one thing to deal with it for, a couple of years. Try dealing with it for a lifetime. Try dealing with it at the worst possible time, which is in the early developmental stages of a child's life.
There's never going to be recourse.
No. Think about, and that's why, from the
angry.
people, Mr. Palladino, and then obviously Melissa Mays, who is an amazing activist who I can't even imagine, psychologically what this has done to so many people.
We've spoken to her, right? I feel like we have.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
This is a story that shouldn't go away and it shouldn't be forgotten. Brian St. Pierre, Jackson, Mississippi. This is everywhere. This is all over this country, and it don't matter if you're red or blue. It just matters if you're green.
It just matters if you're poor.
Yeah, and if you can't pay it, this is the ultimate. This is the ultimate test in the kill or be killed system that we live in today. Either you're killing it financially or you're getting killed financially. So take a pick. That's what this country.
No, people don't have that choice. Most people just get eaten, which is why when really fancy rich places like our coastal places are going to be floating around in sewage, and many of them are. When we get a big rain, there's sewage floating around Fort Lauderdale, and that is not socioeconomic dependent. And when that happens in the nicer neighborhoods, I got to tell you, I'm kind of like.
And it's always so interesting, Jordan, because you see the blue areas like Fort Lauderdale, or you see the blue areas like Hollywood, California, and they're on fire.
Right.
California's on fire.
Here, the fancy areas are flooded. They're flooded.
All these problems, at some point, you just have to ask yourself, have people just simply given up? And yes, I know a lot of them have, but something's going to give.
We need to move to higher ground.
Well, I know you're going.
Oh, I have to move to higher ground.
Jordan, I know you're tired. Don't want to keep you any longer. If there's anything else you're working on right now that you want to plug before you go, please do. Thank you for all that you do. And guys, make sure you pick up a copy like Jen and I have. This is contributing to real on-the-ground journalism. It makes all the difference in the world. And we can only hope that more and more people will pick up this book because it is essential reading for anybody who's living.
Why can't the audiobook ever be released when the regular book is? Why are we always so discriminated against?
Always get me started on that. I had to fight just to get.
We as audiobook likers should be a protected class because we are discriminated. We always have to wait.
I had to fight to get the publisher to do an audio version, so that's another story.
You do it because you said otherwise Jen won't read it.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would tell and ask people is obviously if you can get the book yourself, but please spread the word because as you'll see in the book, a big part of this and a big part of why things like this persist for 10 years, 20 years and get swept under the rug is the media just buries it and stops covering it. And I need viewers to help me get it out there, because half of my battle, the hardest part should be getting the story.
Not
and that is
anymore.
hard. But for me, the hardest part has been getting the media to pick it up and to get it out there. I mean, it's a battle with this book. I'm up against the topic being the media doesn't care, and then I'm up against an election, and it's very hard to get to break through in the middle of the presidential election horse race, and the media doesn't want to cover anything that happened 10 hours ago, let alone 10 years ago.
Isn't that the point of why our election cycles are so long? Isn't that sort of the point?
Exactly. So I just ask people, if you got the book, please leave a review, either on Barnes and Noble page or Amazon's page, and please spread the word. Because even if you're a progressive, like your Republican uncle that you fight with at Thanksgiving, will probably care about this.
Yes.
This is the one issue. I have literally reported from a ranch in Texas, interviewing like a rock rib NRA member, steak eating, Cheney loving Republicans fighting with their community because the water's toxic. I've interviewed tree hugging, progressives. So all people care about this. So spread the word to your friends, your family. This is not a progressive issue. It's not a lefty issue. It's a human issue.
Yes.
And if I do say so myself, I think the book's good. I think it's a thriller. It shows a massive government cover up. Some of it is very fact heavy, but a lot of it's, also shows the human side. I have a lot of stories in there about residents and heartbreaking things, infuriating things. So definitely check it out. And also, subscribe to Status Quo.
Yes.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Talk to you.
I really did start thinking about it as our domestic genocide. These are all things that are domestic genocide. And really what it is it's environmental injustice is really the category that we would put this under, this environmental injustice. And this is something that's been happening, whether it's where pipelines are being put, where the fracking is being done. This has to do where landfills are built, where we dump our waste. And it's always obviously going to be at the expense of the most vulnerable people. And so this is just one more example, but yet it's one that is so glaring, brazen, and proven. And yet nobody seems to even have anything to do. Let me tell you that will be my mission in like my existence politically. If Gretchen Whitmer decides to run, I will be doing an anti-her campaign. I don't even know who else it is. It doesn't even matter who else it is.
The one and the only time that I can honestly say that it does make sense to evoke Jimmy is for this reason. They ask him, why do you fight so hard against Democrats compared to Republicans? It's like, because I'm not trying to support Republicans. I'm trying to support a party that actually is supposed to be supporting workers.
That shit
labor.
failed.
That's over.
It's over.
Over. And now, more than ever, let me tell you something. Two things are going to happen here at the conclusion of this election. And I would advise people to think about this very long and hard.
Think wisely.
If Trump loses, there is going to be a wide open opportunity within the GOP. The Democratic Party, that's over. They have invited all of the neocons into their party, and they have embraced them as tightly as humanly possible. In fact, everyone's been saying the Democratic Party today is as establishment as a party has ever been. And you know what?
Yeah.
I'd really have to go back and think about a time where a party was at this level of establishment
and elitism and oozing of
maybe the Republican Party in the 1920s. That's how far back you have to go.
But you know what's going to happen. You know who is going to capitalize on the labor movement, and who is going to end up getting that portion, that segment will be whoever gets into that party. And it'll be somebody that is, and I'm not saying Matt Gaetz in particular, but it could very well be a populist version, somebody in that party that is going to then appeal to working class people in a way that Trump couldn't. And then the Democrats are really going to have nothing. They're in a lose-lose situation.
The problem, Donald, that you have to remember, and this is the thing that a lot of people fail to recognize, and I say this as you know, if there's one thing that I try to convey as strongly as possible for as long as we've been doing this, I may be registered as a Democrat, but I'm about as neutral and arbiter as you're going to find.
I'm not anymore. I am officially no party affiliation.
So when I look at the voters, do I think that there are voters that are at fault? Certainly. But the voters that I blame the most out of anybody are overly educated, comfortable liberals. And the reason I point the finger at them the hardest is because they project themselves as being know-it-alls. I'm informed. I read the New York Times. I read the Washington Post. I watch Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. And in their mind, they really think that they're smarter than everybody else.
And you know what? And on that same note, what bothers me the most about people in that demographic is that while they do fancy themselves very, very politically savvy, they do actually have the access and the resources to know the truth and to learn the facts. They choose not to.
But they're classist.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what this is.
This is beyond, I mean, listen, there is a reason why, and this is the thing that I didn't even get a chance to bring up earlier, which was about Liz Smith. You remember, Liz Smith is the lady who was having the relationship with Eliot Spitzer, and she has been a Democratic operative. She worked with Anthony Weiner. Like, she's been a New York, like, she's really been in it for a long time. And she comes out with a post earlier going after Jill Stein because Jill Stein didn't know the exact number of how many members of Congress actually exist. Now, listen, I would think that that's something that she should know. I know it. A lot of people who are politically affiliated would know it. However, the idea that you're going after her in the way that a liberal can only go after somebody,
it's so elitist.
She's so dumb.
Now, here's the thing.
She doesn't know.
It does bother me that she wouldn't know that. That does bother me. Not anywhere near as much as it bothers me that Amy Coney Island couldn't name the 5 freedoms protected by the First Amendment. That bothered me infinitely more. So I think that we need to have, context.
Listen, we like all of our supporters on the show. Brian St. Pierre has been following us for a long time. We appreciate his commentary, appreciate his support, even though I don't see eye to eye with him.
Oh, no, I do. Why are you saying you disagree? I agree with you. I think they lose either way. I think this is their downfall either way.
Now, here's the thing that I want to point out, because Brian is he is a supporter of Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party, and that's fine. But the child tax credit, which was probably the best thing that actually, I would say the best thing that happened over the course of Biden's administration, number one, was the improvement of the NLRB. I stand by that. I believe that in part is why Sean Fain had the success he did with the UAW.
Thank you for those crumbs.
Now, that did make a difference, but it makes a difference for a small percentage of society.
Hence crumbs.
Now, the child tax credit, that actually did make a difference for a lot of people, and they took it away after 1 year. Why even give anybody anything if all you're intending to do is...
Because this is why. So they can use it like this.
It's no different than Roe v. Wade. It's the same thing. They could have codified it for decades, including 2 such instances over a 4-year period where the Democrats had super majorities under Clinton and Obama. Could have easily done it. The Republicans couldn't have done a thing.
But then what?
How are you going to fundraise?
How are you going to?
This is why I secretly think that a lot of them still actually want Trump to win, because they know that there's a lot of money coming. Although I will say, and I've said this before, I do think if Trump wins again, they are not going to fundraise as effectively as they did previously.
No, I think that no, they totally won't. And at the end of the day, they are imploding. It's just a matter of, like, we're watching it happen in slow-mo. But they're not going to be able to keep existing. They're bleeding membership, like oozing it at levels that are like ridiculous. And the Republicans are gaining members. So it's just inevitably going to go badly for them. And it should. They have no purpose. They have no principle. They have no platform. They dangle ridiculous crumbs in front of our face and tell us, oh, but we're not as scary as those guys, and we're better to LGBTQ people.
This is also our friend from Canada talking about the importance of the NLRB, but that it was marginally improved. Listen, yes. I agree it's marginally improved, but this is also the thing that the Democratic establishment is, and again, we had 2 votes. Just remember, Brian, and this is the reason why so much has been placed on the emphasis that we are in these razor-thin elections today, whether it's in the House, the Senate, and obviously in the presidency. The goal is to have the slimmest margins possible so that there's always 1 or 2 votes that just doesn't seem to get on board with a particular issue. This is completely different now because there are millions of people in this country who are awake.
You mean like Manchin and Sinema? You mean the designated bad guys?
And if it's not Manchin and Sinema, it'll be somebody else.
Parliamentarian.
Right now, it looks like Brian Tester is going to lose his Senate race in Montana, which means it's almost assured that the GOP is going to win the Senate in November. So if they do, even if Kamala gets in, once again, nothing will get done.
And here's the thing.
And isn't it just so convenient how nothing ever gets done?
And isn't it amazing that they didn't do anything to end the filibuster while they've been in there that could have done a lot of things, but didn't? See, that's
you see,
thing.
Brian, the problem is that you live in a world of pussy Democrats.
So mean.
We need to live in a world where, listen, for all of his flaws, and he was a criminal, maybe one of the most corrupt politicians we've ever had. But LBJ was one of the most effective legislators this country ever had, and he knew exactly how to play ball. He knew his popularity, which was one of the things that Obama didn't do when he was president. He never twisted any arms, and he easily could have.
He didn't even stand up for Merrick Garland.
He had the leverage to basically tell him, you're getting on board with this vote. And if you don't, I'm either going to primary you, or if you're in the GOP and it's a swing district, I am going to put $10 million behind your opponent, and then you'll be out of a job. No one does that anymore. And the reason no one does it anymore is very simple. Corporate special interests have captured our government on both sides.
Right. They don't care. They win either way. I have said it for the longest time. Democrats at the highest positions, I don't mean Democratic voters. Those are just tools. Okay.
Different.
But what I mean is at the highest levels, Democrats infinitely prefer Trump to be in office. They don't have to get anything done. They have forever excuse, and they fundraise in the off years. It's like basically getting, sabbatical and being able to fundraise off it. And I just want to put this out there. I have like in my mind, and this is my thought process now and where I am. There's really only 3 kinds of people in this world. There really are. There's 3 kinds of people, and people need to decide, it's either you are part of the capitalist empire. You're one of those people that benefit. So you're in that group. You're either a useful tool of that group, or you're a revolutionary. Those are the 3 choices. You're either intentionally in that group, a tool of that group, or fighting against that group. Those are your 3 options. And it's very unfortunate that we've gotten to this point. But honestly, everybody in that middle, you have an opportunity to switch over. You know what I'm saying? The people that are at the top people, they're intentional. There's no reason. You don't even need to talk to those people.
Now, one of the things that Jen and I have been talking about, which I think is the undercurrent that no one really wants to acknowledge, and why my gut is telling me that Trump will probably find a way to pull it out if we're talking about the presidential election, is simply this. I invested so much of my time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears, if you will, into Bernie Sanders in 2016. I didn't do it in 20, but in 16 I did. I knew he was something special in that moment, and we needed him. And it's not just Wasserman Schultz, even though she bared a hell of a lot of responsibility. The system basically said, we are going to rig this thing, and we don't care if it costs us the presidential election. We'll say it's Russia, whatever. We'll say it's Jill Stein.
There was no way. They way preferred Trump to Bernie.
But Bernie absolutely would have won if it was a fair election. And I think most people acknowledge it as much. I saw the rallies. I was there. I saw everything. It was real. That was a real movement. And people really believed in that. Now they're bragging about Kamala Harris doing rallies with 5,000 people. Bernie did rallies with 35,000 people. Like, this was a real movement, and people really believe. You want me to click on
Well, I just want to say something to Brian about this comment, because she talked about making a carve in the filibuster to get Roe versus Wade passed. Let me explain something to you. Okay. So she's the vice president right now in an administration that could have already done that. When she was a senator, I don't remember her speaking out in favor of that. Also, I don't believe a word that comes out of her mouth. They say all sorts of things. It doesn't mean they're going to do it. And they would only, and by the way, I actually believe this because I do believe they're this nefarious. The only times that they say they're going to do something like that is when they know they won't be able to. Because if you say you're going to do it and you're not able to, then it's not on you. You said you would, but this is what happened. So to take anything that she says is just no.
Now, the rally that you're thinking of, Brian, from 20, which was in Brooklyn, was about 30,000 people. But no, Bernie had rallies in 2016 that were absolutely insane, that people wanted to pretend weren't happening.
Yet stadiums.
He did Boston. He did Los Angeles. He did I remember one time the first rally that I knew something was happening was when he did it at the University of Wisconsin, when they were in Madison. And Bernie brought in at least 10,000 people. And we've had John Nichols of The Nation on our show multiple times. And he has said he knew that something was happening in that moment. He knew that there was a movement happening.
He's a rock star.
And the Democratic Party decided, no, we are bought and paid for. And that is that. And you could blame Obama. You can blame Wasserman Schultz. It's the system that's broken that can capture people like they do in Flint, like they do in East Palestine. Turn the other way, and you'll have a nice fat check in your wallet. You know, like they do, like in The Godfather, who said, you're going to have an extra Merry Christmas this year. And that's how simple it is to buy off the average person. It's unfortunate, but that is what the system's become.
Well, but that is also part of why we keep people poor and desperate. When people are poor and desperate, then they're very malleable.
100%.
And they're also very ignorant because they don't have time to be worrying about what's going on when you're just trying to survive. That's always the case, is to keep people really ignorant.
2020, unfortunately, is one of those anomalies in the annals of time that we'll never fully know what really went on. Whether it's the people who think that the election was stolen because of all the mail-in ballots, whether it's people who thought that because Bernie decided that people's health was more important during the primary, and everyone rallied behind Joe and told people to go out there and vote, even though it was apparently killing people. The point is this: up until now, we're living in almost like a simulation where we still want to believe that something's real, but it's not real. And the fact that they were so brazen in two ways, it wasn't just one, it was two ways. Number one, it was obvious, probably since, look, Joe Biden's been in cognitive decline for probably 7 or 8 years, if we're being reasonable. But he has been in complete decline for probably the last 4 to 5 years. If there was a normal election in 2020, Trump wins in a landslide. He was predicted at 80% before the pandemic
And
happened.
again, Joe barely won.
So you fast forward to now, and you decide to not only run him again, knowing full well that he's not there in any mental capacity to run this nation, even though there were plenty of options. Granted, most of them suck, but the options were there. We all know Gavin Newsom wants to be president. We all know Gretchen Whitmer wants to be president. We all know J.B. Pritzker wants to be president. And we sure as hell know Josh Shapiro and Pete Buttigieg want to be president.
Oh, my God. Good luck to you, Josh.
And you better believe that they would run in 28 if for some reason Kamala Harris isn't able to win. And why would that be? Because not only did they not conduct an actual primary with Joe Biden when it was obvious that that's what they should have done, but then they just decided we're not only going to remove Joe, we're going to stick Kamala in there, and we're not even going to have a fight at the convention. We're not even going to do anything to show some sort of a democratic process.
No, they don't care.
We're going right in with it. And so why do I believe that there is an axe to grind, not just with Josh Shapiro, possibly with Gretchen Whitmer? You never know how they're feeling behind the scenes, because the significance of 2 of the governors that I just mentioned are in states that the Democrats cannot lose. They cannot lose Pennsylvania, and they cannot lose Michigan.
And they're going to.
And they may very well.
I think they will.
So here's my point. Even though it's very tongue-in-cheek, you think Joe Biden likes the fact that he was kicked out in the twilight of his life?
I honestly don't think that he's even really aware. Metal, we have commented many times on that Bernie just ate their crap and just went and licked their boots. We've said that many times on this show.
I would definitely agree with Sarah. Newsom is the American psycho, baby. Like he's Patrick Bateman. He's just waiting for that opportunity. He would be the most cold-blooded president we've ever had. Like he really, like he's out of a Marvel comic. Like you thought Mike Pence was dangerous. He'd be just as bad.
Well, the goal, people, needs to be the implosion of the Democratic Party.
Sorry, Gavin.
Before they get to that point. And if they keep bleeding like they are now, they won't be able to win another election after this. They won't have the numbers.
There's a reason why he was called the Amendment King. Remember, Bernie is the reason why the the Protect Women's Act was put into the crime bill. It was Bernie who made sure that that happened. It was probably one of the only good things that came out of that. But today, well, actually, no, this is yesterday.
Still wasn't worth signing it.
So yesterday, 9/11, we know we always have to be reminded of the worst terrorist act in our nation's history. It's not January 6th. So they all descended upon Shanksville, Pennsylvania, which obviously is a very rural community. It's a very Trump community. But President Biden was there. And he had an interaction with a Trump supporter. And here's how it went down.
There you go, man. I need that hat. You want my autograph? Hell no. You know my name. Come on. I ain't going that far. Yeah.
You can barely form sentences. This is ridiculous. Like, such a grandpa. He's ridiculous. This is the president.
But this is the image that is captured. He knows that he was holding a Trump hat.
He doesn't care.
And he puts it on his head. And you know why I think he put it on his head? Because he really doesn't give a fuck anymore.
He doesn't care.
And
well, I think he's in La La Land too. I don't think he's cared for a long time. And now you could see they'll lax up on his meds because he doesn't have to be as focused and shit now.
Now I would say for Sable, no, I don't think he went MAGA. But what I think he is doing is he's putting out a smoke signal to basically say, I don't care if Trump wins. Why would I care? You decided that you didn't want me anymore. You know, the truth is this process could have easily been done a year and a half ago. And it's been admitted time and again that they knew that he was in massive cognitive decline. He was not running the country. I've been saying, how long have I been saying President Blinken on this podcast?
But here's the other thing. They knew that it had to be him that ran. And they knew that if they had a real primary, that Kamala wouldn't be able to win. And they knew that this was the only way for her to win, is for him to stick in there this long so we have no time to have a primary and then put her in. That's the only way this was ever going to work.
But think about it this way.
She couldn't get elected.
In essence, it says to me that the cracks in the armor are just too obvious now. And maybe the reason they feel that they have to go in this direction is because they know that they can't legitimately get away with it anymore. That they know that there is a yearning for a real change within the system. Now, unfortunately, down here in the congressional district that Jen ran in, there were multiple misfires. But let's be honest, the reflection of what this congressional district is the ideal representation of what the current status of the Democratic Party actually is. Wealthy, suburban enclaves surrounded by Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
It's very privileged. It's very privileged, and it's
in many ways. It's very reminiscent of the district
in terms of who votes.
That Jamal Bowman got knocked out of.
Right. In terms of who votes, okay, there are definitely some not privileged people in this district
100%,
that need
but
help.
It was a dismal turnout, and we know, based on a lot of crunched numbers from a very skilled individual who helped us on this campaign, that not only is it the western part of this congressional district that votes en masse, but it's also a part of the congressional district that lives behind gated walls. And that is a big problem when you're trying to bring the democratic process to people who desperately need it. What do the people behind the gated walls care?
They don't.
They don't care.
They don't.
What's important to them?
Well, and this is also the people that I think, to me, are the same people that do not understand the difference between feeling unsafe and feeling uncomfortable. These are people whose lives are so comfortable that the slightest thing that they don't like is their concern because they have everything else. So it's just more symptom of privilege.
And Colin, I believe that this is this Taylor's endorsement here?
Oh, do we have to get into pop culture?
No, it's not about, well, it's really not about pop culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what okay.
Because I don't care what Taylor Swift does. And I don't think it should, I don't want to get on an anti-Taylor thing.
No, it's not about being anti-Taylor, but Taylor Swift made her endorsement of Kamala Harris, which of course was expected. Shortly after the debate the other night, she decided to do it, which in a lot of ways I actually don't think was a very smart move on her part, because I think it kind of it happened at a time where a lot of people were focused on the debate. And it was almost like she could have waited a day to do it and probably would have had a lot more effect. But as has been pointed out by Brian in the chat, it actually has been effective because evidently over 300 some odd thousand people, because of her tweet or her Instagram post, decided to go out and register to vote. I don't know if they registered as Democrat. In the presidential election, you don't have to. You just need to be registered to vote. But look, Taylor Swift.
Most people don't register as Democrat. They just register no party.
Well, we saw what's happened down here in Florida in particular. I mean, it's like 10% of the registered voters are registering as Democrats. 30% as Republicans, and 60% as independents.
And yet all the Democrats here strategically do is register voters who are not registering as Democrats. That's how skilled they are strategically.
Yeah. No, there is no question that this is significant in terms of, could this potentially create some momentum in some places? Yes. But in many ways,
if I was her publicist, that something like that would not have gone out.
And somebody like Taylor Swift, look, not my cup of tea because I'm just not into that type of music, but I know a lot of people that are. And what I also know is that going to see her in concert is almost an exact replica of the broken system that we live in. It is unbelievably expensive to go see her shows. And she's not the only one. As you know, and Jen has given me a lot of shit for it, I'm a big Springsteen fan, and he has gone down that path of charging an arm and a leg for people to go see their shows.
A lot of people do. I don't play that game anymore.
But what do all of these particular pop culture individuals have in common? They're all spokespeople for the Democratic Party establishment. I don't even care that Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris. More power to her. If that's what she believes in, that's fine. You know what I do have a problem with? Her probably secret fiance, even though she says it's her boyfriend, Travis Kelce, who's one of the most popular, recognizable football players in the world today, signed a contract to be a spokesperson for Pfizer.
That happened a while ago, didn't it?
Now, apparently it happened recently.
Okay.
I have a problem with that. And I would think everybody should have a problem with that. Why would you be a spokesperson for Big Pharma? Like, I don't understand. Is
it any different than being a spokesperson for Big Ag? Or some sort of, like, they're all simping for somebody.
What makes it even worse, though, is that Kelce doesn't need the money. He's already got ridiculous endorsements, a ridiculous contract, but let's pile it on a little more.
I just don't think it's cool for you to, like, attach this to her.
No. Okay. I'm saying that is the bigger periphery of the story, because they are in a relationship. The relationship is constantly addressed on the news. And of course it is now, because the NFL season is in full swing. By the way, does anybody want to tell us how much time is left in the Bills-Dolphins game? I don't want to keep Jen here any longer than she needs to.
I didn't even know they were playing.
They're playing right now.
How's my guy Mostert doing?
Not playing tonight. Fuck me over in my fantasy league.
I know that
I'm never picking a player ever again because you make a recommendation.
No. Why? What happened? Is he just like out?
Yeah, I don't recall what the
that's
the
not good at
injury
all.
is.
Well, don't blame me. Although I do believe you did pick him because of me.
I did.
I know.
Not the smartest move.
I know. But you did it for you had good intentions.
Nelson, whatever the reason is, it's not a good one.
No,
that's the thing.
But at the end of the day, why is it bad? Clearly, they are both. It is all about Damone. They are both, him and her, extremely like capitalist tools. So why would it matter? Like, her endorsing Kamala is no like better or worse or different than him doing being a spokesperson for pharma. They're all connected. What difference does it make? So she just endorsed a candidate that is okay with corporate whoredom in general. Like, why is one worse than, I don't know. It's all the same to me. They're obviously, again, there are three people: intentional parts of it, useful tools, and revolutionaries. These are one or the other. These are people that are on the cusp of the top two. They're somewhere between those top two based on how much they're profiting. But yeah, they're not with us.
And I'm going to share one final thought, which I know a lot of people have been talking about in the chat and in the news as of today. So Donald Trump has rejected any additional debates with Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris is aching for more debates. You know what that tells me? That the internal polling is showing Trump in the right direction and Kamala in the not so right direction. That is the only reason why he would say, I'm totally done. I don't need another debate. And she's saying, no, debate me more, debate me more.
No.
Because if they thought they were going to get the swing that they needed out of that debate, they wouldn't be asking for another one. In fact, if you remember, for anybody who doesn't have a short-term memory in politics, and it seems like everybody does, it was Kamala saying before this debate that it's only going to be one debate. How did that change all of a sudden? Well, I thought Kamala destroyed Trump in the debate.
I didn't watch it. So let me be very clear. I didn't watch it. I could not care less. But they don't believe a word that comes out of either of their mouths. So there's no point in hearing a debate.
But only Trump lies, apparently.
I don't believe either of them. So it doesn't matter who wins or what doesn't win. First of all, let me be clear. Most people don't watch it. Most people don't watch it. And of the people that watch it, everybody already had their mind made up who went in and watched that debate. Everyone. There is nobody that the jury was out, first of all, on Trump. Maybe they weren't totally one way or the other about her. That's possible. But we're talking small. Everybody who watches the debate already had their opinion, and they're going to say what they think that they saw because people see what they want to see. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just like what Jordan reminded us, Hillary beat Trump.
In the first debate.
In theory, whatever that looks like. And she definitely outspent him. And it doesn't matter. And I am kidding you not. They are repeating 2016 again. I'm in Groundhog Day, and it's just Hillary in a Kamala suit. And people, and the worst difference between this and 2016 is that we're not even given the Bernie option. But they're going to end up with their same result as to just what happened between Hillary and Trump. And I look forward to it. I do.
The takeaways from the debate, and you guys know that I did the pontificating of this the other night, and I was very clear about where I stood. I thought that the debate was fairly even with a slight edge to Trump, because on the key issues that matter in this election, he made his point and he nailed her in the closing statement when he said, you've had 3.5 years to do these things that you supposedly claim you're going to do, and you haven't done any of it. In fact, you did some, and then you completely reneged on it. And it's like, yeah, that's what people are going to remember. They're going to remember his stupidity about the cats. That's going to stick. But you know what else is going to stick? And unfortunately, we do live in a world where women's mannerisms matter more than men's. Her with the putting the hand on the chin and the smirking. And
by the way, and I did see clips of her, and she was like rolling her eyes and smirking and stuff.
That pisses voters off.
Well, again, it's that Hillary Clinton school of condescension. It's, you think that it's all that, and you have all of your like sycophantic neolib people that are like, oh, you go, girl, you showed him. Yes, that is a small element of people, but to most people, it's a huge turnoff. I know. And you guys, everyone, if you don't know, I am a very, very proud member of the League of Women Voters of Broward County.
We try to do everything in their capacity to be nonpartisan, which is what we wish everyone would be.
I love my League ladies.
Even though the League of Women Voters are predominantly liberal, but at the end of the day, they do everything in their capacity to maintain neutrality.
They do.
You know, it's like Johnny Carson was a conservative. You had Walter Cronkite, who was a liberal, but you never knew that they were because they would never say it.
The League is really good about it. I will say, and I've been to the state convention. I've actually been to the Florida League state convention with my chapter, with my local league. And it is very, like, these women are seriously professional and like on it. If they were still involved in this, nobody would be seeing debate questions ahead of time. This would be done like legit. And that's why they don't want them to do it, because the League wouldn't like mess around with this.
It really is just about performance.
Hence why I don't want to watch.
I would say that the performance, if you want to look at it that way, was more favorable for Kamala. But this idea that debate objectively really shifted the conversation in this election,
it didn't.
And then they go out and then they start asking people in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, what their thoughts were on Bucks County, PA is like 75% Democrat. It's like, you can't even objectively do this.
No.
You can't even try. If you really wanted to do objective polling in Pennsylvania, you go to Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is in the Rust Belt. Then you'll find out where they really stand. And there, you're probably not going to get the answers you're looking for.
Which is why they don't go there.
If you go to Southeast Pennsylvania, you're going to get much more favorability towards Kamala. But you go to the rest of the state of Pennsylvania, and it's going to be a mixed bag.
Oh, it is.
That's what's going to happen.
I was just there recently. I can attest to this. It's very diverse. Pennsylvania Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, is a lot more akin to Kentucky or Ohio than it is to New York or New Jersey or Connecticut. Pennsylvania is not, it isn't. And I've been to rural New York. I've been all through western parts of New York. That's what I'm saying. Like, I've been to rural places, and Pennsylvania is way more of a different vibe. It just is.
If you go back and you watch the debate, particularly between Kennedy and Nixon, what you'll see are just two exceptional statesmen who were ready to lead this nation at a time where corporate special interests hadn't completely taken us over yet.
Now it's just
ridiculous. now it's really over, because the people who could potentially listen. Look at Governor Beshear in Kentucky, maybe the best Democratic governor in the nation. He'll never have a chance to be president. Not a chance, unless he decides to just basically sell out. And I try to tell people this all the time. We actually had a governor for the first time in decades that was doing a really good job until he decided he was going to have a chance to be president. And then he fucked the state royally. And he's still doing it because he's a little petulant child who didn't get what he wanted.
I'm Ron DeSantis. I wear lifts in my shoes.
But DeSantis, in his first 2 years as governor, he did a good job.
I wouldn't go that far. We have a low bar.
Decent job.
Decent. And he did okay on some things. But again, we have an extremely low bar here.
And considering that we had Rick Scott and are still stuck with Rick Scott, yes, this is what we have to deal with. But then all of a sudden, he ventured into the culture wars.
But you know what? I'm glad he did. I'm glad DeSantis did what he did, because now I really do think he's done. I don't think he's going anywhere after this. I think he's really shot himself in the foot politically. I think it's going to be, he has nowhere to go. I don't think he would be able to challenge for the Senate. I don't think so. I think he really shot himself in the foot by what he did and pissing off all different types of backgrounds and people in doing it.
I agree.
And I think, so I think he's kind of done when he turns out. I think he's going to go, he'll go make money lobbying for some, something unsavory.
Well, if you think things are bad here, you better believe that they're that much worse in Gaza and the West Bank. And of course, that, maybe above everything else, was my biggest takeaway from the debate.
That they didn't even talk about it?
No, they talked about it.
What did
they
say?
Talked about how much they love Israel.
Yeah, keep going with that.
And everyone wanted to talk about how Kamala, what's the lawyer term? You walk dog a person into something? What's
leading?
Leading. Well,
she was leading.
Well, Trump led Kamala into admitting how much she loves Israel.
Good.
That's one thing that I remember.
Keep that up.
She totally doesn't appreciate Israel. She hates.
You see what he's doing? He's really smart. Do you see? I
love Israel. I love them.
He's pushing her to outright him. Oh, it's brilliant. And, he doesn't even need to do that. That's what I've been saying. He doesn't really need to do much. She's going to implode all on her own.
And this is the one thing that is working for Jill Stein, and she's running with it like a bull in a china shop, which is a smart move.
It is the issue. It's the only, honestly, I can't think past that and get to anything else at this point. Yeah. I just can't. So yes, that's my single issue right now.
I try not to think about it, because when I do think about it, I realize, this is what matters.
I can't. I force myself to watch stuff. I have now seen things.
Could you imagine?
I have seen things that I never.
Think about what happened in this country on 9/11. Think about it. If you were there to experience it as we were, this entire country was traumatized because of some airplanes that flew into buildings. These people have bombs being rained on them every fucking day.
And Israel says what happened October 7th is like 10 times. It was 10 times, like having 10 9/11s.
Could you imagine what would happen in this country to the fucking weaklings that spend all day on social media telling everybody that we have to keep sending weapons to Ukraine? We can't lose to Russia. They're going to take over Poland. Could you imagine what would happen in this country if bombs rained from above?
People
in these
oh my
suburban
God.
communities, they would all have heart attacks. Like they'd have heart attacks.
And by the way, speaking of heart attacks, children have heart attacks in
They do.
Gaza.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
12-year-olds having heart attacks in Gaza being documented.
Well,
But go vote for Kamala.
I
'cause
just
that's what
saw a
matters.
clip of 2 toddlers next to each other that were both missing their legs, and
Yeah.
they were alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched that. I force myself to do it, but I am not, and I will never be desensitized. I am not desensitized. I am definitely not desensitized, but it's I have seen things.
And Donald, you're right. But it isn't a minority vote for the people that could actually affect the selection.
I don't
And
like
that
honestly
in itself is, and this is what makes it, and we can leave on this note, which is so amazing, because when you get right down to it, the role of the president is foreign policy. It's not domestic policy.
No.
It can make suggestions, and there are exceptions. Once in a century, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, and FDR. And that's it.
Everyone
There's
else
no one else
did anything like
you could say Reagan for the worst.
Well,
and JFK was trying to go in that direction. Of course, that didn't last long.
Yeah.
But that's how it is.
And
This
none
is
of these
about-
people are that. None of them are
No.
that.
We look at our foreign policy.
I actually think, like, honestly, I'm voting for Dr. West. I am.
Therein lies the danger.
I am voting for Dr. West. He is actually on my ballot. In Florida, he's on under the Natural Law Party, whatever that is. I don't know. But that's how he's on our ballot here. And you know what? This is
Yeah.
I can't. And I honestly do hope that the Democratic Party implodes, just like the state of Israel. I actually would like them to implode together. I want to see the end of the Zionist state, and I want to see the end of the Democratic Party. And by the way, the Republican Party can go too. I want no parties, let me be very clear. But I find the Democrats to be particularly just extra icky, and also so weak that they kind of on their last legs, that it's a better opportunity to take them out.
Yeah, because either way, I don't see how it can be sustained. But what I will say is, if Kamala loses, all the people that I mentioned are definitely running for president. But I also think that there's a real chance that AOC is going to run. Because you don't do these things unless you have a plan.
What does that say? Yeah, I cannot with the things I have. And I make myself watch it. And I know that that's on me. But I feel like at the very least, we have to bear witness to this.
Yeah.
And it's important to bear witness to this. And I honestly, they can keep trying to gaslight us. They could keep, it doesn't like, I
agree with that, Chris. I will tell you.
I hear you. And this is the thing. So I thought about that. Okay. So if I really thought that Jill Stein could get the 5%, okay, then I would consider that, which I did think when it was Biden instead of Kamala. However, I no longer, and especially that was when RFK was still in. Now that we're in this scenario, I don't think she's going to get the 5%. And so at this point for me, I just want to vote for who I really like.
And I think everybody has that opportunity.
And you know what? And I that's the whole point. I should be able to just vote for who I really like, and who really speaks to my heart is Dr.
Jen, you're
West.
not being reasonable. You have to be pragmatic.
Well, and even if I were being pragmatic, I live in Florida. So even if we vote blue, it wouldn't matter here anyway. But
decisions of what people need to do when it comes to voting.
Vote your heart.
Yeah.
And I really am.
But keep this in mind, with the exception of North Carolina, assuming that it is actually a swing state this time around. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. You know what they all have in common? Jen, do you know what they all have in common?
No.
They all voted blue in 2020, and they're all swing states this election.
Oh, that's interesting.
You think they're all going blue again? Probably not.
No. Statistically, it's not likely. That's enough. Like we don't ever underplay the fact that Trump lost.
No.
Trump lost. Joe didn't win. Joe barely won, and it was a pandemic. So to think that, and that's, I again think we're reliving 2016 more than 2020.
36 electoral votes. 36 electoral votes. You know where you get 36 electoral votes? Pennsylvania and Georgia. And that's it. That's all it's going to take. And right now, I'm just not convinced. Or Pennsylvania and Michigan. And the state that a lot of people think is going to fall in Trump's column is Nevada. Not that I think in the grand scheme of things that that's necessarily going to make or break the election.
No, I think that the problem for her is going to be Michigan and Pennsylvania. And I think that that's gone. I do. I think
Say that just yet. The election still has to happen. But the closer you get to election day, the more you'll realize that when people have decided that this system can't be salvaged, that's when they're going to go to Trump and be like, well, I guess you'll accelerate this process a lot faster than somebody else will. Because as I've said before, and the one thing that, if you're talking about from a real logistical standpoint, that the GOP does worse than the Democrats is who they put on the judicial benches. And I agree with that.
It is a problem.
But remember this, especially with the Supreme Court, never again in the history of this country, so long as we have the current system that we have in place, will a GOP-appointed conservative justice ever voluntarily step down when there is a Democrat in the White House.
No.
Never again.
I don't think either party, I don't think either side will.
Well, that's true too. But the Republicans are so much better at this game. And so for them, if Trump gets in, you could almost rest assured that Alito and Thomas will retire and he will appoint 2 more justices. And if Kamala wins, they will sit there unless they're leaving in a bag. And that's it. That's how it is. So at some point, we have to be honest with ourselves about where the system is.
Well, and does it even matter? Like Joe Biden could be expanding the court. He could have done, like, there are a lot of things that could have been being done to help this predicament, but they don't do it because, again, this is a fundraising tool. Also, I would point out that Obama did not push Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she did not leave when she should have.
Easily could have.
Easily. And also, Obama did not fight for Merrick Garland. He rolled over and played dead.
I remember.
And it was absolutely like that whole thing was
even
ridiculous.
Something as simple as, you guys can go look this up, but remember, Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the longest tenured DNC chair ever. She was the longest at 5 years, and she would have kept going. There would have been no reason for her to step away other than Bernie making his move at the convention to get her out. I think he could have done a lot better, but nevertheless, Obama tried to get Wasserman Schultz out in 2012 at the convention, and she called him an anti-Semite. And he backed off. So either you have the cojones to do this or you don't.
Well, he had aspirations of Martha's Vineyard. He didn't, it wasn't about principle.
No, got to get the payday. And that, unfortunately, is something that we've pointed forward one too many times. You can't eat money and you can't drink oil. So as we come to our conclusion for the evening, and I hope you all enjoy, to make sure you smash that like button, share, subscribe to all those things we ask you to do. Monday night is going to be a very important conversation because we are now going to have Daniel Mate on our podcast. Jen was able to speak with him and Katie Halper earlier this year.
And he also has a show, podcast with Matt Lieb now called Bad Hasbara.
Well, maybe
Bad Hasbara. Well, yeah, I mean, that would be fun. But yeah, and that has come up from what is going on right now in Gaza. And so it is definitely the topic. So be prepared, Metal.
And above all of the reasons, you endorse, you accept, you accept Dick Cheney's endorsement. Remember, Bernie said
about it.
One of the best things that Bernie did back in 2016, he did 2 things that I'll still remember on the eve of the Chicago primary. He told Farmer Bro Martin Shkreli to shove it up his ass. Take your money back. I don't need your donation. I don't want your money. I'm not taking it.
Yeah.
And then he said, because remember, it was Mayor Rahm Emanuel at the time that endorsed Hillary Clinton on the eve of the Chicago primary, and Bernie came out and said, "I don't need a criminal like Rahm Emanuel endorsing my campaign. Hillary, you can." I was like, that was the Bernie we needed. That was that fire.
Can we? And by the way, we hadn't talked. You and I have not talked about this, but one of the clips that I did see of Kamala, and it went by me, and I thought, and nobody said anything about it, and then I did see somebody mention it. Thank you. Was she was actually bragging that Goldman Sachs approved her economic plan. And I thought, did she just say that out loud?
No, she said like a dozen Wall Street firms or something.
No, she specifically said Goldman Sachs.
Well, Goldman Sachs is giving her a lot of money.
The person running for president literally just thanked their sponsor during the debate. She just thanked her sponsor.
Listen, Jen, I didn't know that she actually was endorsed by the Wall Street banks.
They like her economic plan.
No,
so what does that mean?
Plan, if it's being approved by Wall Street, is definitely not a good plan.
Well, you're behind her, so and there's a genocide.
I have to do what I have to do. Donald Trump is an existential threat, but it sounds like Kamala's not much of a picnic either. You cannot and will not succeed if you think that getting the endorsement of the Wall Street banks is going to make this country any better.
She kind of glossed over that. And then I was watching, I forget which one of my shows I was watching, where they absolutely brought up, bragging about Goldman Sachs supporting your policy is not a selling point.
I am on here this evening to tell you all to go out there and vote for the person that you think is best representative of your core values that you think would do the best job. I am not telling you who to vote for. I am just saying.
Yeah, you are. You're telling people to vote for Kamala.
No,
and you got no concessions for it.
You got to vote for what you believe in. I cannot support anything related to Wall Street. That's not the answer. That's not the answer, Jen. It's not the answer.
Then you've got to stop supporting Kamala and the genocide.
I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that I stay out of this from now on.
I'm too annoyed with the whole thing right now.
I am too.
It's hard because I do appreciate Bernie for everything that he did do. And I do believe he's done a lot. And I think Bernie's been an amazingly good reformer. I think he's brought things to the table that we weren't talking about. I think it's important. I think he launched certain people in terms of their aspirations. He's not. First of all, he doesn't do women well. And he really cannot do
the cackle.
A lot of things. Okay.
It's amazing when you think about it.
It would not go well.
The Hillary and Kamala cackle are almost identical.
Well, you know
that's
why
they picked each other.
You know why? I honestly, have you ever seen them at the same place? When was the last time you saw them at the same place? How do we know that Kamala's not been infected with some sort of? On my soap opera, they take somebody's brain and create a microchip so that you can implant them into somebody else. And so, how do we know?
It's true. It's the truth.
Well, let me say, I did say this, and this was something, and I saw Metal was saying this in the chat about that, with Trump, you would have people like Kennedy and Tulsi in certain positions that I would actually appreciate those people in certain positions. I would for what they're good at.
It's amazing.
And I said, and Kamala will appoint Wall Street. And so, yeah, I do. I agree. Having it. Yeah.
But I also think that Trump is creating the ultimate vacuum in the GOP. It's going to be incredible. He's the kind of guy that would be you know what? I think we totally got to put Sean O'Brien in a position of power. You're going to be the Secretary of Labor, Sean O'Brien.
And that's it. And then it's game over for the Democrat. As far as I'm concerned, that's game over for the Democrats.
I'm not trying to give Trump any ideas, but listen,
you know what? That would be the end of that.
Who is the Democratic Party making as who's chairing labor?
I'd love to know.
At least and tell me
who is
as Wall Street as this administration is becoming by the minute with who Kamala's bringing in, is there any reason to believe that if she gets in there that she's not going to do exactly what those Wall Street bastards have asked her to do, which is to fire the one person in the NLRB who's really leading the charge right now, Nina Khan? They are desperate to get her to get them out, and these are people.
Make no mistake, Trump would probably, would never keep her either.
Probably wouldn't either. But you're talking. Well, it's also administrative differences for sure. But the billionaire in California, I can't remember his name. Reid Hoffman.
Oh.
Reid Hoffman going on MSNBC and CNN and CNBC all the time, saying we got to get Nina Khan out of.
But that's him in his advisor capacity, not in his donor capacity.
He only gave $100 million to.
But no strings. He was simply giving that advice in his advisor capacity, not as a donor. He would never expect that. That's our local guy here. Just because I take the money doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Different.
Here's my Justin Timberlake staring face.
I just don't like him now. I really don't like him. He's a douche.
Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things.
I feel like he really wronged Janet Jackson.
If you're nasty.
I just feel like he really wronged her. And I'm not like some Janet Jackson fan, but I find him to be a pussy. I find him to not have honor. I'm just saying.
We hope you enjoyed. And of course, yes, we definitely agree that the nail in the coffin should definitely be Dick Cheney, because he clearly will not be nailed to the wall.
Well, again, she's just publicly thanking her sponsors.
That is what she's doing.
It's Goldman Sachs, Dick Cheney.
Love you as well, guys. We'll see you Monday.
Oh my God.